Hello and welcome to this, the first of the FCEI webinar series for 2021. My name is Trudy Smith. I am based in Sydney, Australia, and it's my great privilege to host this first webinar, and we're so delighted to have you all with us. Being in Australia, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. I'm currently in Sydney, so the Wallamadigal people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and just acknowledge the privilege of being on Indigenous land here in Australia. With such a really wonderful lineup that we've got for you today, we really wanted at FCEI to concentrate on what is important, who are the people that we're doing all of this work for, and parents and family-centeredness is the core value of FCEI International. And so we thought that we would start talking to parents and, to use a whole lot of cliches, we are truly in unprecedented times. And as we just heard, America continues to be in unprecedented times with just weather, let alone a global pandemic. But all of these things continue to challenge us in our day-to-day lives. And when you are a parent of a child with disability, this is just one new thing that you have to learn to deal with on top of everything else as well. And so often parents are the most resilient when it comes to dealing with something like this, because this is just what you do when you have a child with disability. It's simply about overcoming the next challenge, and often with good humor and with a true sense of, I'm doing this to ensure that my child has a really wonderful life. And the parents that you're going to hear from tonight will absolutely be sharing that with you. The format for tonight, we've got, as you can see, 6 parents with us from all around the globe. We also have participants from all around the globe, and wonderful to have you with us. And I'm just going to check and make sure that everyone is muted that needs to be. So that we've got that. Yep, all good. So to ensure that we've got lovely, clear access to everything that's being said, this session is being recorded. We are providing American Sign Language, New Zealand Sign Language, and English captions, and we are grateful to the providers for supporting that access tonight. And so if you have any difficulties accessing those, please just let me know privately in the chat, and I will try and resolve that as we're going through the evening as well. But for now, I'm going to get off the stage and let the actual stars talk to you as well. But what we've asked the parents to do is to talk to us about their family and to talk about, obviously, one of the challenges that the pandemic's brought us. And it will be interesting to hear how the pandemic has affected everybody in different countries around the crisis, but also a success. What are some of the nicer outcomes that have come around the pandemic? Sometimes I think it can be easy to get caught up in all of the difficulties and all of the challenges. And as I said, you resilient parents, you come up with the solutions. And often as professionals, it's up to us to just stop talking and listen and learn from you. And so we are really looking forward to listening and learning from you all tonight. So our first parent who's going to talk to us tonight is Hannah. Hannah is based in Bristol in the UK, and she's mum to Olivia and Elodie. So Hannah, looking forward to hearing from you tonight. I'm just going to get you to unmute, that's it.
Thank you, Trudy. Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, so I've got 2 daughters. I've got a 9-year-old who's hearing and a 6-year-old who has a moderate hearing loss. So to give a little context, in the UK, we've had sort of 2 separate periods where there's been a stay-at-home order with normal schooling closed. So in the past year, my kids have just had 1 term of face-to-face schooling. And so we're in the second period of that at the moment. So the children didn't go back after the Christmas break, and we're really hoping that schools open again next month. So I'm going to start with a positive, I think, if that's okay. Is that all right? Or would you prefer that? Yeah, okay. So in our normal lives, we feel like it's quite busy, I guess. Like everyone, there are kind of appointments to be at, the kids' hobbies and social events and just places that we need to be. And so when the schools shut, and once we got used to everything, it really felt like life had slowed down. And we were restricted, obviously, to staying in our neighbourhood, but in doing so, we found like walks we'd never been on before, and the kids started to play together a lot more. they didn't have sort of other friends to choose from, I guess. So they became a lot closer. And this was kind of going back to March, April time last year, and the weather was really on our side in the UK. And the kids just really enjoyed being outdoors. And I think what we really all benefited from was not having a place to rush to be at. We could just kind of be there in the present moment. And it was almost as though kind of time stood still a little bit as a family, although there were like obviously terrible things happening all around the world. For us in our little household, it felt like we could kind of be present in the present moment, I guess, more than we ever had before. So, so as it kind of came to the end of 2020, I felt like although would never wish, obviously, for a pandemic like this, it's awful, but there were definitely some positives that we could take from the year as a household, and things that I want to try and include once things do go back to normal as well. But the caveat to all of that was that sort of during that time when the kids were off school, I was furloughed. So I wasn't at work in that time, and it meant that I could give the kids my full attention. So going on to sort of the more negative aspects, I guess. So since Christmas, as I say, we've had that stay-at-home order again. So the kids haven't been at school since, but they do this time have a full day of work set each day, which are pre-recorded lessons and worksheets. And because it's new learning, it means that they really need a parent to be able to sit next to them to make sense of it. And both of us parents work from home, but even with an understanding employer, there just aren't enough hours in the day to get our work done and to a good standard, and also to help the kids. So that's just putting a strain on us all. And I think for us, while the schools are shut, that they're obviously missing their work, but a bigger concern to me is just the social and emotional impact on the kids. It's like winter now, obviously in the UK, and they're screens all day trying to do work. It's, you know, they're not kind of out playing as they had been before, and they just really miss their friends, and I just feel like they're missing out on a natural part of childhood development, just being able to play, and that's quite sad to see. And I think especially for my eldest, who's 9 now, it's kind of natural to start wanting to have a bit of independence from your parents, and to be kind of stuck at home just doesn't feel like natural. So for me, that's the biggest negative, just the kids not being able to spend time with their friends and being stuck with parents who can't give them as much time as they need.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? They're strengthening their relationships with their siblings, but they really, it's that outside influence sometimes that's really important as well for development. So thank you so much for that, Hannah. And we're going to give everybody the opportunity to dig deeper and ask more questions of our parent group. So feel free to use the chat now to put your questions. We've got some time after we've heard from all of our parents today to direct those questions. So if you've got a specific question for one parent, pop their name at the beginning of the question. But if it's a generic question that you'd like me to throw to the whole group, please just add that as well. So thanks so much, Hannah. We appreciate that. We're going to hear now from Layla. Layla is in Desful in Iran, and she's mum to Agavid. And so Layla, tell us about your COVID experience.
Hello, and thank you for your invitation. To be honest with you, at the beginning of the quarantine in last February, we had a really pleasure time together, because we had a lot of free time, and we played to each other, and we painted, and we also read lots of books with Aragawan, and we had actually printed some worksheets from Pinterest, and after that Aragawan did it, and in general we improved our knowledge together. And but after 3 months, I discovered that she couldn't pronounce some letters well, and really, I was shocked because before that she was great, and just I think that maybe because she's far from her friends, and she couldn't go to kindergarten. I think myself, children needs children, and they grow up together. And because she couldn't meet her friends, I think that affected her bad in pronunciation. And after that, we consulted to one of the trustworthy speech therapists in Tabassum Cochlear Implant Center we had there. And she analyzed her talking, and after that said that, yes, she needs to a speech therapy class again. And attending to the class at that time in the pandemic was very difficult for us. And my husband and I talked together a lot, and we must to go, and we wore 2 masks and gloves and attending to the class again. Actually, I want to say that I wasn't disappointed. I continued the class, and although the weather was warm and humid, we wore masks and attending to the class. And after 4 or 5 months, she became great, much more better than before. Another thing that was very good for me was the online support group that we had, Parwanha Association. We could be with other parents and help each other and gain information about the some rehabilitation. And just I want to talk about some troubles we had in Iran now, if it is possible. We had some troubles now that one of them is lack of accessories of cochlear implants, some batteries, cobs, microphone protector, and so on. And because of international sanction. And another thing is accessories are so expensive, as well. Importing hearing aid hearing is so difficult for us. And although I myself wasn't very bad days in pandemic, but now they have most of families are in troubles because they are worries about the hearing of their children. And another thing that because of the pandemic, most of families had a compulsory delay in cochlear implant surgery of their children because the centers was closed, and they missed the time of the golden time of the children. So my intention is the raising awareness of the world that there are lots of children here that they have trouble to hearing on, and some of them are because of the international sanction that we confronted now. And I myself, because I am educated, I had a lot of relationship with centers and associations, and we could study books. I could manage my daughter problem, but most of families, they need rehabilitation, they need consultant, they need some friends to push them to go to class and work with their children. Because of that, pandemic for most of families was very bad, but for my family, not that much.
Yeah, you sound like you're such a powerful advocate, both for your child and for your community, Layla. They're so lucky to have you. And as you say, the power of that um, social capital, that ability to work in associations, find the training, locate the books to learn more. It's what makes your parents so extraordinary, your ability to find what your child needs. And that's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing that situation in Iran. I think sometimes we feel we take for granted in some countries how easy things are to access and to locate. So thank you so much for sharing that perspective. We're going to move on to our next parent now. So wonderful to have Beenam with us, who resides in Dubai and she resides in Pakistan. And she is mum to Rasim and Reem. Beenam, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, so I'll just start with the positives first, because I guess because we live in Dubai, we live in a multicultural kind of a thing. So in general, frankly, we were like, this thing brought us closer as a family, I think. And frankly, what is the best thing is that my kids realized that because mommy is not a working mom, they always assume that mommy doesn't do anything at home. So they actually saw that no, that is not the reality. Mommy does do some work at home. And magically things don't appear in the cupboards and cooked food doesn't appear on the table. Actually, on my, it was a very good time in this regard, and they started contributing a lot, my son. And in some way I also think that we realize that too much time together, like they would in the past they would complain going to school, or some people they would not like to meet, but stuck together for such a long time, they were willing to meet whoever possible, going to any parties. If I would say, they started missing the people who in the past they would not even like to meet. So in some way, I think the pandemic brought us closer, but in some ways it also taught that too much closeness is not also good. Each of us needs their own space, their own time. So in that way, I don't know, I think pandemic, and it has taught us the importance of relationships. We live far away from home, and we would rather go on a our holiday instead of coming visiting our parents, or aunts and uncles and all of them. First time when we made or had all our festivals by ourselves, Eid, Christmas, Diwali, because in Dubai we celebrate everything. So we didn't have Secret Santa, we didn't have a Eid Milan party, we didn't have Easter Bunny. So everyone was like, it was the pandemic hit everybody like, we are missing so much. We are missing socialization. So that I think is something, pandemic taught us, that how important human beings are. Screens are not that important. And for the downside, I guess, e-learning for me, because in Dubai they had school. My son had school from 7:45 in the morning till 3, and they had e-learning. And because of his cochlear, I know he struggled. Even though sometimes I would put Minimake, I would try to do that, but I know that he was struggling with that. And a few times we tried to get in touch with the cochlear office for the audiologist to maybe make some settings. But because of the pandemic, they were closed. And they were closed for almost, I think, 6 months. They were closed. They were not working. So that was a major issue for me. And but I guess his teachers and his inclusion tried to help a lot. But I know it was hard for him. And he tries to work hard, he tries to focus. I try to help him out, but it's not easy when you have another toddler at home shut down. So it's not easy. So in that regards, I think it's very hard. Even the accessories, the prices are skyrocketed initially, because it was not easy to get stuff. So, but I would thank the social forum. I think the parents of cochlear kids, I think they're amazing, because I got help from somebody on some Facebook page who recommended someone in India who was able to purchase me a coil cable and then courier it to me to Dubai. And it was, I don't know, if there was no social media, I don't know what I would have been able to do. So yeah, I'm so glad that there is a social media. There are so many parents, and the parents are helpful. They're willing to give you their time. They're willing to share experiences. It's amazing. Yeah. That's
Thank you so much, Beadham. And I think what we're really hearing resonating here is that the joy of being together, that the importance of family, but the power of network and digital networks and looking after each other. So thank you so much for that, Beadham. We really appreciate hearing from you. We're going to move a little further north now and head back to the UK with Juliet. Juliet is mum to Rosie, Ellen and Bess. Great to have you with us, Juliet.
Hi everyone. Thank you for having me. So my name's Juliet, and I live in Bristol in the UK, in the southwest of the country. I've got 3 daughters who are 9, and then I have twins who are 7. And my 9-year-old is hearing. My twins, one is hearing and one is profoundly deaf. She's got bilateral cochlear implants, and she also has auditory neuropathy spectrum disorder as well. She's at mainstream school, and she has some one-to-one support as well at school. So I think I'll start with a positive as well. It's kind of, I think, echoing what Trudy just talked about and the other mums have talked about in terms of family time. I think the biggest positive for our family has been spending that time together at home. You know, I've been working from home, my husband's been working from home. We've had no clubs after school, and there's been no rush. It's just been spending the time kind of in the moment all together. My daughter actually said to me, Mummy, I don't have to rush after school. I can just sit at home and I can spend a whole hour writing a story if I want to. I don't have to spend 10 minutes, you know, which is at school where it's all very, very fast and sort of split up into little chunks. So it's given my children, I think, the freedom to do more what they want to do and to play. And I think given in school in the UK, I think not enough time is spent on kids playing at school. And I think this has given them that chance to play with each other, to build their relationships as siblings, and just to do lots and lots of role play at home, playing schools, playing hospitals, playing vets and with pets and all sorts of funny things that they do. I think another positive related to that is that my daughter, who is deaf, over the lockdown last summer in the UK, where we had several months at home without any schooling, improved in terms of her language. I think because we were talking so much to her as adults, and her sisters were chatting away with her, her language got better and better. And I thought, you know, that was an incredible thing to sort of notice that had happened. Also, she finds it hard to sort of grasp concepts a little bit, to sort of understand what's going on. She's always trying to what's happening, and it gave her a lot more time to really grasp, okay, so what's the plan for today? What are we doing? Not having to constantly keep up with a really fast pace of life. We had lots and lots of outdoor time, which again, they wouldn't have got so much in school in the UK. A lot of time is spent indoors learning. So we had lots of climbing trees, lots of trips to the park, and lots of fun playing with whoever they could find that were the same age as them. Another positive, this lockdown, because as Hannah talked about in the UK, the kids aren't at school. Actually, my daughter Bess is going to school this time. She's allowed to go in because she has a one-to-one at school, and she's been going in without her siblings, which for her is a big thing because it's increased her confidence at doing something that only she can do. She's not always very confident in terms of her deafness, and I think this has really helped her to be independent and to increase her independence as well. So, and also without her twin, she's been doing it all by herself, so that's been great. In terms of, I guess, negatives, and particularly for my daughter who's deaf, I think it's been her unmet need kind of educationally and socially. It's lucky that she's got 2 sisters to be able to play with at home, so that's really helped her social interaction. But educationally, I'm not a teacher, my husband's not a teacher, and to be able to meet her needs at home, where we're trying to explain what teachers are asking us to do, is not the same for parents. Parents have a different relationship with their children, and my daughter would shout at me, she'll have tantrums, I don't understand the question, I don't understand what you're trying to say, because I'm her mum and I'm also not a teacher. So that's been difficult. She also had some tests at school last month, and some language tests, and they actually showed that despite me thinking that her language had improved last summer, she's kind of back to where she was 2 years ago in terms of her grammar and her vocabulary, which as a parent made me feel, you know, a little bit unhappy, a bit sad that she hadn't been able to access that at school, that the pandemic has impacted children with disabilities in different ways, and this sort of really showed to me that not having been at school will have impacted her language, and not having that being taught to her at school so much. I think she'd gone from the 76th centile down to the 16th or something for her age, and it really made me unhappy. But you know, overall, I think as a parent, I just have to remember, and I guess giving advice to other parents, and I'd say to, I guess, to professionals, that any time spent with your kids is good time. It's really beneficial in terms of your relationships, and in terms of their development. It's amazing that we've had that opportunity to be together as a family. I know it's not the same for every family, but that's one kind of positive, that the quality time is a good thing. So
yeah, and thank you for reiterating that point, Juliet. I think it's what we will come out with the pandemic is much stronger relationships with family and that real sense of understanding. But I guess again, we're hearing again that importance of access to the wider community, and whether that's just the language that teachers use that's different to the language that we use at home, you know, that slightly more sophisticated language that we need kids to keep moving through, and the challenges and pressures that can put on parents. So thank you for acknowledging that. We really appreciate it. We're going to head much further south now, to closer to my end of the world. Wonderful to have Oliver with us from Wellington and New Zealand. Oliver is dad to Zoe, Elijah and Carter. Welcome.
Tēnā koutou katoa, thank you very much. I am deaf myself. I have a family history of deafness. My wife is hearing, and I've got 3 children. My oldest is 19 and deaf. I have a 17-year-old son who is hearing, and a 5-year-old boy who turned 5 just recently, and he is also deaf. So a positive from our experience, when COVID hit New Zealand, I was really proud of the New Zealand government that locked down so quickly and so effectively. It really impacted our family, of course. We had our lockdown at home. My son was 4 at the time. The best thing was Deaf Aotearoa and First Sign Service. They changed how they were working and changed it to weekly. So we were on Zoom weekly with my son, and also they sent blogs and videos through Deaf Aotearoa, the First Sign Service, and they sent stories of the week, and they sent them through to us as a family, and my son watched them later on. And it was great to see for our son. Our Deaf Education Centre also has 2 different services available to us as well, and they had similar contact methods as well. Obviously, it's not so long for a 4-year-old. Their concentration span is it's hard. They can't concentrate for as long as older kids. But really, I saw after the lockdown, I saw that my son, my youngest son, at 4, had excelled in his sign language skills. They had excelled, because he saw all this exposure. When he went to preschool, he's one of the only deaf children at the preschool, and his teacher aide has minimal sign, and the other person who comes in from First Sign doesn't necessarily sign all the time, but he got this NZSL exposure from the family, and his sign language skills skyrocketed. His communication was fantastic. I felt really lucky as well because of the technology that we had, those technology advances that we had. That information was provided through the technology that we had. The second thing that I saw as a challenge was that my son was only 4 at the time. It's difficult for his attention span, especially on Zoom. It's very hard, like he couldn't concentrate for a full hour. At the start, my wife would try and encourage him and try and organise things for him, but he can't sit for that time. You know, he gets fed up. He wants to go and do something else. He's excited. He wants to run around. And it was also difficult with the screen one-on-one. You know, like he would try to communicate and then he would get distracted by something else, still communicating, but outside the span of the screen. So that was a challenge for us as well. But really, his language has just excelled, and for that, I've been so proud. But when lockdown in New Zealand had finished and my son went back to his preschool, I saw that he was a lot more confident because that foundation had been fed through to him from the Deaf Education Centre and from First Signs at Deaf Aotearoa. And as a 4-year-old, going out there and seeing a little confident boy signing, I felt really proud. I felt really proud of him. And I was also super proud of the New Zealand government and their control of COVID. I know that it hasn't been easy for a lot of people, but really that's my wee part.
Just watching for the change of interpreter. Thank you so much, Oliver, for sharing that. I think what this is really highlighting for me is the differences between language, between both social language and what Juliet and Oliver have both very eloquently talked about, that increase in that social language, that ability to relate to people, and then that second tier of language, that academic language. But I think when we're thinking about the people, little people that we're bringing up, that social language, that ability to relate to, and Oliver, that's that increasing confidence that your child has now as a result of being able to much more ably communicate, I think is a really powerful outcome of COVID. So thank you so much for sharing that. Really appreciate it. I'm going to head a little bit west now with Bianca in South Africa. Great to have you with us, Bianca. Bianca is mum to Hadassah, Talita, and Eden. Welcome, Bianca.
Thank you. I'm going to start with some of the negatives first. Lockdown has been hard. COVID has been really hard. And I think it was very early on when in the middle of the night I woke up suddenly realizing that the day is going to come where everybody's going to have to wear masks. And what is that going to do for the inclusion of my child, especially at school? So a little bit of context was that my kids are all late identified, and we have moved heaven and earth to try and catch up, and have done so pretty much. So anything's possible for any parents listening out there feeling that they might have missed the boat. Just keep going. But one of the things that we did need to do was bring them home into a cottage school setting and do some really intensive remediation really to their language development. And they were finally ready at the beginning of 2020 to be integrated into a mainstream setting with a group of teachers and staff who were so willing to be as inclusive as possible. So as they start and as we were getting into it, lockdown happened and we had to come home, and that was just extraordinarily disappointing for all of us. They cried. Finally, their whole thing was, Mom, finally we get to spend time with friends. And that was really, really hard. But after just 2 months at school, I did see some gaps and decided that we were going to use the time at home to just figure them out. And we did. I feel like I deserve an honorary teacher of the deaf degree, because I did everything I could to try and learn how to teach these different things between the three of them. All three of my kids are deaf. And after 13 weeks with Mom as teacher, they went back to school stronger than the average child in their class. And that was, yeah, just a huge experience of perseverance for all of us. But at the same time, with the rest of the world worrying about death and family members dying and exposure, and my family's medical, so extra exposure, all that was just as significant as anybody else. But in some ways, the stress around their communication access and their ability to go back to school when school started again after that being something they'd worked so hard towards was actually more stressful. Not because the other stress was less, but because that stress was really significant. So before masks became mandatory, before it was even on anybody's radar as a possibility, I was emailing the headmaster, giving him the heads up, this is going to happen and these are the different things we're going to need to do so that my kids are coming back to school just like everybody else. And we did a little home experiment with before any information was known really about masks and safety and visors and things, looking at literally 30 different options of different things. And instead of, I think early on, I think lots of parents are trying to make the kids feel better about everything, trying to ease their anxiety. And sometimes not having incidental hearing is quite helpful in that way. But at the same time, we just realized that we needed to actually look this bull in the eye and take it by the horns together as a family. And so we involved all the kids in trying this little home-based experiment of different masks. How does that sound? How does that work with the FM system? How does this reverberate my voice, etc.? How does this work with signing? Sometimes we cue when we're doing different vocab. How did that work? And they really enjoyed that experience. And I think they did learn a little bit about research, which was definitely a positive. And then it's certainly, I think the hardest thing now, they've gone back to school just a couple of weeks. And the hardest thing is the social distancing. And I don't mean that physically, I mean that as a result of a barrier of a mask. So their friends still have to wear masks on the playground, and all they want is friends. And for them to know that they're missing stuff all the time, every other kid goes out to break in a normal setting to have a break, and my kid goes out to break and is working harder than anybody trying to pick up the social cues. But we've slowly but surely got them involved in involving their friends. So we sent messages out to all the children's parents to tell them, my kid needs to be included and your kid wants them, trust me, they're awesome. And so we brainstormed different ways of doing different games outside. We would have one-on-one play dates over Google Meet because it was captioned for them to get to know their friends, etc., and just did whatever we could. And I definitely have seen as a positive come out, their friends having a heightened awareness of their peers, their deaf peers' needs. And yeah, it's just grown empathy within the friendship group, which I think has been really, really awesome. I think having to endure through yet another challenge can only strengthen one. But yeah, there have been times I've felt close to emotional burnout just from the stress of it all. But then I think I'll just end with sharing one story where my one daughter told me that she had the best day of her life. And it was after she was going back to school, but all the extramurals were still online, which included ballet, which was on Zoom. Amazing what things can happen that we never knew was possible. And so one of the strategies we had realized during our intensive 13 weeks at home was that pre-teaching was the key to actually not missing stuff that's being said in the classroom. If they had that vocab before it was even said in the classroom, they're not sitting there wondering, what have I missed? What was that word? They were there. So they were doing a set book and we were highlighting vocab words at home before they were even going to read it at school. And the word happened to be idiosyncrasy, which most adults don't know what that means. And I even had to look up. And that was something we had looked up. And Charlotte's Web, by the way, was the book. And the teacher said, so who does anybody know what idiosyncrasy means? And she shot up her hand and she knew, and she told them what it meant. And they were like, oh, wow. She said, I felt so clever, Mom. And then we'd been drilling tables and things, and they did a pop quiz. And she'd said, well, you know what? I've decided while they were doing the pop quiz, I just wasn't going to take down my hand because I knew it to answer every single time. And that just boosted her. And that was just the extra effort that families of deaf children sometimes have to do, like pre-teaching, really pays. And then she came home after school and logged into her ballet. And the teacher was trying to be really engaging and interactive with the children, asking them questions. And the one little friend could not unmute herself and was getting so frustrated by the fact that she couldn't express her experience or whatever the answer was that she was going to give it. And my daughter unmuted herself and said, hang on, remember, I have a superpower. I can lip read. I will relay for you. And so they did that. She's like, oh, wow, okay. And so she relayed for her little friend. And the friend would give a thumbs up when she was every time. And at the end of it, that little child who was hearing was included because of my deaf child superpower. And the teacher acknowledged it. What would we have done without you? You made today possible. And she just floated out of that room, having had such a great day, saying, Mom, I had the best day of my life. And that was definitely the highlight of our lockdown.
That is such a great story to finish these on, Bianca. Thank you so much. And I love, I've got the superpower. I can sort you out. I just love that she could use the skills that she had to enable a peer. And I guess for that moment, all of her friends, you were talked about all of the work you did to build their empathy. Nothing like that experience gives them that really deep understanding of just how hard it can be when you can't be understood. You really want to share something and there's no way to share that information. So thank you so much. I'm so overwhelmed. I've taken so many notes in the last 40 minutes, having heard from you all. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think me personally, what I'm hearing is just how hard parents work to support their children. We heard from Layla finding the books, and we heard from Bianca, who I think we should probably give an honorary teacher of the deaf degree to, and the power, I think, as a professional, one of the things that I'm hearing is that importance of connection and having both parents talking to parents, parents talking to professionals, making resources available to support parents in their work at home. And I'm just going to put this to all of you. Is that an accurate reflection? Is that what we should be doing as professionals and enabling those connections? Hannah, what do you think? I know with your work, you're starting to do some of that.
Yeah, I think the connection is really important. I think the difficulty for parents, if they're working and just can't put the time in to supporting their kids, I'm not quite sure what the solution is for that, because we've had really great support from Teachers Deaf team and so on, but they can't be there to actually sit next to the kids. So yeah, I still haven't kind of got a solution for that bit, but the importance of connections definitely is so important. Parents supporting other parents.
Absolutely. Does anyone else want to speak to that?
Julie, can I share something?
Please, yes.
Actually, what you say, I will strongly agree with that, because in Pakistan, the cochlear does not have a proper setup. Especially, it just started a year ago. But there was this guy who said, I represent cochlear, and he said, I do mapping and this and that, and he started giving cochlear, because Middle is more popular in Pakistan. So he started getting this cochlear, and he could not map properly. He gave this magnet, which was such high, strength, that the kid did not have hair on whole this patch where the magnet was. So because of this social media, there's another mother in Germany, Judy, maybe you guys know. She works with cochlear. A parent got linked with her, and because they were talking about how things happen in Pakistan, she found a representative in Cochlear Australia. They somebody from Australia came to Pakistan. They brought in a proper audiologist from Singapore, and he mapped the children. And one of my friend was a victim to this guy, and she said, you cannot imagine the improvement I saw in my daughter after the proper trained guy from Singapore came and did the mapping. So this connection, this parents helping out parents. Even I wanted that water accessory which came before the accessory. So it was not available in Dubai, and the few, they were selling pack of 2 for $100, 2 or 3. So I found this guy in Australia, and he said, I'll purchase it for you. I'll give it to your brother in Australia, and he can bring it. You can just pay me half, because half I'll keep for my daughter, half you can have. I don't know, it had a lot of them. So this is very important. And I feel I've met so many good people on my journey. And people from all corners of the world, or parents, maybe the parents are able to relate to parents. So they help each other out. if you discuss with them, if they can in any way, even if it's by sharing a story, they're helping out. And I tell parents who have older kids, I read stories about kids going to nursing schools and medical schools and even firefighters. And I feel so encouraged. I feel motivated. I feel like, yeah, my son can do anything he wants to do. I started with a fear. What will happen? I could see nothing, like a dark tunnel. But now I feel like, no, he can do anything he wants to do. If he puts his heart into it, he can do it. So yeah, I feel, connections, parents, this is very, very important, especially in the world of today.
Sure. So yeah, do you feel that I guess by joining these parent groups, it's less isolating? You don't feel like you're I'm not the only one who feels like this. Everyone actually has a moment where they feel like this, or they feel the sense of overwhelming, but they can see if someone they're talking to has older children, they can see that future and that very real map of where your child can go, and that their possibilities are endless.
Trudy, I can relate to Bianca, because this is what I would do with my son before he started school. Before he started preschool, he knew whole alphabets. He knew how to count till 20. Even then, in one of the school I sent him to, they refused to admit him. They didn't even take an admission test. He was 3.5. He knew alphabets. He knew countings. He knew the spelling of his name. I requested, why don't you want to take an admission test? And they were like, we are not willing to take responsibility of your instrument because it's too expensive. So, I've been through that. And thankfully, I found a school where the teachers were very helpful and cooperative. But it took me 2-3 years of my life to actually accept what the teachers were saying. They were saying, he's just 4, he's just 5. Stop, sit, breathe. Then I would sit him down and I would like, what did you do in school? Show me. Can you write this? Can you do this? So I was so scared that he will struggle. He'll fall behind. So I can relate to her story that, it's not easy. In a lot of places where inclusion is not easy to find. It's very difficult. And when I listen to her stories, and I listen to parents, they put out that their kids question that they question that, why were we born deaf? Why were we born with this disability? Because I've had my son ask me this. Why was I born with this? What went wrong? I don't have an answer. But when I see other parents, I sometimes pick up answers from that forum. I molded. I tell them this is the reason, and maybe the one sitting up there wanted it this way. And my husband has the best answer. He goes like, it is because you are the lucky one. When you get married and your wife is having an argument, you can always take it out and sit nicely. Luckiest of us all. So,
I love it. Juliet, I saw that you unmuted. Did you want to contribute to the conversation?
I just wanted to add that I think in terms of connections, I think it's one of the hardest things is for families who have new diagnosis or identification of a deaf child. I think if they're completely new to the experience, they're not going to get the same help from other parents. They can't meet other parents to chat about what it's like for their baby or their child. They won't know who those parents are necessarily. And they won't get the same help from professionals who in the UK aren't allowed to visit the homes. There's just maybe a phone call or a chat over the internet on Zoom. And I think for those families during the pandemic, it's probably been the hardest because they have no sense of what it is normally in terms of the support that you can get. And when there's so much hands-on work with whether you're learning a new language, a new sign language, or having new technology, and not being able to lip read over Zoom, all these kinds of things, I think those families are the ones that I really, really feel for in terms of connections, both socially and trying to understand deafness.
Absolutely. And that's appearing in the chat. Globally, cochlear implant surgery paused. And so for a lot of families, that meant that they were on the journey and then everything stopped. And so what do we do now? And Layla talked, I think it was Layla that talked about that golden time, that we know that there are windows of listening opportunity and language learning opportunity, whether that's sign language or access to listening and spoken language. And as you say, when you've had a child who's either learning a sign language or has a cochlear implant, you're almost already embedded in those groups. You've had access to therapists and teachers and support, and your network is already in place. But we may actually have a group of parents globally now that feels like they're a little bit in limbo and they may be lacking some of that support network. It might be something that we need to think about. How can we put a safety net under some of these families who are just waiting for that next step? And, the importance of making sure that they know they're not alone. They're not isolated. There's advice, there's information, there's support, there's care that's available. I'm not sure how we support them through that, but all of you have talked about the importance of that support network and structure. And I think we should acknowledge that the pandemic, while it's had some lovely outcomes, there are probably a group of families who are still really struggling and still waiting to take that next step as well. Oliver, I was really interested in what you were talking about with the sign language and the fact that your son has the benefit of having at home people who can provide him with rich language input in sign language. But yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I've seen for lots of families it has been really difficult. I feel that in New Zealand it's possibly a unique situation because through our lockdown we did really an intense lockdown, and that was 3 months. And then after that, I feel that we've kind of gone back to normal. We've gone back to socialising and all those things. So, it's been quite normal in New Zealand, which has been really a unique situation. But I have seen that for children that have been diagnosed, it will be really difficult, and it would obviously impact their entire families through that diagnosis. And I do feel sorry for those families in that situation who have had a recent diagnosis. But for us, I feel like, yes, we had a lockdown, but the government controlled it so well. And last week in Auckland, we had a COVID spread and there was 2 people, so we locked down right away. So in that city, they locked that down straight away. So we've had that control also after our major lockdown as well. And what I've seen is that the world has really looked at New Zealand and really shown a lot of respect to New Zealand for this harsh way of locking down. So I think it's really important that the parents do get that access and that we support their children, whether they have a deaf child, and making sure that access is equal to their hearing peers. But I do really feel lucky within my family and within New Zealand.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. One of the comments in chat was just talking about one of the practitioners feels really privileged because of lockdown and remote learning. They actually feel closer to the families because they've had that little insight into almost beaming into everybody's lounge rooms and having that opportunity to connect with families as well. We're coming down to the end of our session. I think there's just been so much information that we've all taken from this. I just wonder if any of our parents who are with us, any last messages that you're wanting to share as professionals or for other families, if you have one little piece of advice or anything that you'd like to share with us. Layla?
Yes. I talked about our connection with the association and also Cochlear Implant Center, speech therapists, and Dr. Mowalali that I learned a lot about her and also her books. And, the most important things that I realized for the hard of hearing children is that you never be disappointed and you want to be the best. And with every problem, you must continue. And, I have a 6-year daughter, and I had a really hard working for her through 5 or 6 years ago. And I have a lot of experience, and I can help other parents that they realize the hard of hearing of children. And you know, in the association, if we could consult other parents, it would be really helpful. And also, you know, I can study books, I can have connection, but some parents, they can't. And I can, I would be a book for them, you know.
Absolutely, you are the teaching resource.
Exactly like, yes, exactly like this. I can study and tell them and talk to them. And but the really important thing is you never be disappointed. All the time, you should have the confident to be the best. But unfortunately, we these days I talk about it again because it is very important, and most of the families have worries about it. Lack of accessories, lack of cochlear implant, whole of cochlear implant. You know, we had a lot of families, a lot of children, and they are waiting for importing cochlear implant from the Australia or America, and they missed the golden time. You know, for example, we had a child who is 6 months, but when we could have a cochlear implant on their ear, for example, it takes time, about 1 year, you know, it is really long for her and or him. And now these situations are very stressful for parents. For example, some mounts for about 4 or 5 months, and there weren't any batteries in all of Iran for cochlear implants. You know, it is very awful.
It's really challenging.
And because they are very expensive, most of families are not afford to buy them. Actually, we had some charity, but it is not enough, and they are much more expensive than the charity could pay all of the money of this. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and thank you again just for reminding us that, you know, we're all in this together, but some of us have it still much easier than others, and we really appreciate you shining the light on that, Layla. And I think what I'm taking away as a professional, again, I keep talking about all the takeaways as a professional, but I think that's the beauty of, you know, stop talking, listen to the families who are the teachers of us. You know, you have been the warriors for your children, you have done all of the work, you've learned all of the lessons, and we can learn from you. And I think this has been the most wonderful hour to do that. So thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your time and your stories and your wisdom with us this morning here in Sydney. We really appreciate it. We're really grateful to Jason from Bradley Reporting for providing captions, to Laurie and Jackie for providing American Sign Language, to Debbie and Shoshana for providing New Zealand Sign Language. So from all of us at FCEI International, thank you so much for spending this hour with us. I think we've all really benefited from the time. Please take care wherever you all are, and we will see you next month for the FCEI webinar.